Access to Democracy is made possible thanks to the following organizations. Sheridan and Dulas, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm that has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009. Sheridan and Dulas are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Distillery was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at their facility. If you're interested in learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check their website and plan a visit to tour their facility and taste their spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Access to Democracy. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Bill Raker. Before we meet today's guest, we'd like to take just a moment to acknowledge a few things about the program Access to Democracy. First thing I want to note is that we are starting our 26th year of being on the air. Our founder of the program, Alan Miller, had his first interview on Access to Democracy on August 1999. And since that time, over the years, we've had over 1,500 very interesting and very informative guests to join us on the program. The program originates with the staff and facilities of Egan TV, and it's carried in some 35 markets throughout the state of Minnesota. We also are on YouTube, and we have our own website, Access to Democracy. And the ADT program, over the years, has spawned a couple of spin-off programs. Behind the Game, which is a sports-focused program that's hosted by Patrick Klinger. And most recently, our founder, Alan Miller, started a program called Writer's Corner, which features local artists and is hosted by Alan Miller. We'd like to thank our financial benefactors for their support. You can see them at the beginning of the program. And to thank you, our viewers, for your interest in the program over the years. So with that, let's meet today's guest on Access to Democracy, Amy Koch. Amy, welcome to Access to Democracy.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
It's a pleasure for you to be here. I know you have a lot of experiences, wonderful things to share with us about the roles that you've had and continue to have in politics here in Minnesota. And that's one of the reasons I want to talk about what we're titling the program today, the current state of politics in Minnesota. And we know there are a lot of things going on.
There sure are. And it's about to get hotter.
Yes, I'm sure you're going to give us some perspective on that. But, you know, before we get into that theme, Amy, there are some really interesting things in your career that you've been able to accomplish over the years. Like the first one that comes to mind is that you were the first female Senate Majority Leader here in Minnesota.
Correct, in state history. Now there have been two others, but it took 11 more years. So I served as the Senate Majority Leader in 2011. So can you imagine, the first woman in the state history was 2011. That's the first time. And then it was another over 10 years before Senator Carrie Dietzig was elected as the Senate Majority Leader. And now, currently, we have a female Senate Majority Leader, Erin Murphy. So now there have been three. It's a small club, but yeah, it has been. So I'm a Republican, and we've had two Democrats, but the first. So, and the first and only for a very long time. So it was very lonely.
Well, I mean, just one question about that, and then I want to move on to some of these other fantastic facts. What were some of the challenges to break through that proverbial glass ceiling to get that leadership role?
Yeah, well, I always like to say I broke the glass ceiling and the glass floor here for women in the state of Minnesota. And it is tough, and it still is tough. Although I will say, in the last couple years, I have seen definitely a shift for women in politics. And I know it's very disappointing for women to hear it's only been the last couple years, but we have finally achieved almost, I think we're around 50, maybe 50% of the legislators in the House. We are not to that number at all in the Senate, and there still are some challenges. For example, the Republican GOP, they have 33 members in the Minnesota Senate, 4 of them, I'm sorry, we just reelected 4 are women. So we still have some to get our numbers up. But it is still has been an old boys club. It really has, until very, very recently. It was largely, and by the way, that isn't a partisan issue. As a Republican, I broke that glass ceiling. It was Republicans that did that. And in that year, in 2011, we also elected the first woman president of the Senate, I appointed the first woman tax chair, and the first woman full finance chair, all for the first time in 2011, and all by Republicans. And so it has just been a very long time coming. Women in general, and we could talk about this, I could talk about this forever, don't tend to run for office as much. They really need to be brought into the fold. There's a variety of reasons. But thankfully, I will say, I'm here to say it's really starting to reach some real parity. I mean, we're 50% of the population, and we're finally starting to get somewhere close to representation on that.
So with that hurdle over, we're moving on, right?
Let's hope so.
So one of the other things that I note about you is a U.S. Air Force vet, right?
I am. I'm a very proud veteran of the United States.
And you were in the Defense Language Institute, and you're certified in Russian, whatever that happens to mean, right? Yeah, right, okay. What was it like to be in that kind of a role?
It was a tremendous opportunity, and I'm very proud of it. I actually don't talk about that a lot, which is it. So I joined the U.S. Air Force, and I told them I would only join if I could become a linguist. So I intentionally wanted that program. It's a very intense program at the Defense Language Institute. The greatest language institute in the world is in Monterey, California, in the country is in Monterey, California.
Yes.
It is a military. They have every language you can possibly imagine: Japanese, Farsi, Spanish. You do not get to choose your language. So I signed up for a 4-year stint. So I was assigned Russian, and at the time it was a very interesting time. This was 1992. The Gulf War had just finished, but I am officially a Gulf War vet because it had just wrapped up, and I enlisted in that time. So as you can imagine, the Arab school was really exploding, and the Russian school, the wall had come down. We were just starting to see it, but they were still sort of in the pipeline. And then I always said they cut the Russian program too short because Russia is always going to be an issue, And so it was a fantastic experience. You have to have a top secret clearance, so you have to clear that hurdle. The school is incredibly intense. It is 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, your full-time job, and you become fluent. In fact, you must test fluency in speaking, reading, and listening. And then your job, I worked at the National Security Agency, is also a top secret cryptologic linguist position. So fantastic opportunity. Strongly recommend for people.
And because of this work that I think you've done in that area, you were awarded the Joint Service Commendation Medal for contributions to the intelligence community, the U.S. intelligence community. Is that right?
Yes, I was.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I'm very proud of it. Again, I'm grateful to all veterans. I certainly haven't served in, and I did not serve in a combat role. I distinguish myself from that because I have so much admiration for our vets that have served and fought overseas. But I'm very proud of the service that I did, and I'm glad to have served this country.
Well, thank you for the services that you did give. Thank you. And then I want to ask about one more thing, and then we're going to get into this topic of politics in Minnesota today. There's a podcast that's been around for a while, and the title of this podcast is Wrong About Everything, right?
Yes, correct. That is
Okay,
correct.
who started this podcast? How did you get on it, and what's that all about?
Well, I'd love people that, if you're watching Access to Democracy, you want to listen to Wrong About Everything.
Okay.
It is 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and we have been getting together for over a decade. And I just want to say, for most podcasts, they last about 3 to 6 episodes on average. We are in hundreds and hundreds of episodes. We've been doing a weekly podcast for over a decade. And we do Minnesota political news, and we do federal political news, but from a very insidery perspective. So the founder was Javier Murillo. He's a former SEIU, super progressive lefty, and Brian McDaniel, who is my partner, a conservative commentator and also a political advocate and lobbyist, and he's been in the business for over 25 years. So there's super insider information. But the whole thing is, right, like Javier's my friend. He's super lefty. He's wrong about everything, but I love him. And he feels the same about me as a Republican. And so that's how we approach it. And we talk about all the tough issues, but we don't shy away from it. But the idea is that we don't come to agreement. We can listen to each other, we can disagree, and we can be friends. And we're really friends, and we joke. And, this is something that we started in, again, it's been over a decade. So well before Trump and well before all of these, really, we started to see people going into their silos. And we knew that we needed to start something to show you can have a super progressive like Javier and a super conservative like me, and we can get in a room and we're friends and we can talk about the tough stuff and still be respectful and still love each other.
Sounds like fun.
It's super fun.
I've wanted to get Javier on the program. I've tried to reach out to him, haven't connected.
Well, let me know.
so maybe when you're next with him, you can pass along that.
I'll let him know.
You got to be on Access to Democracy.
I'll promo the show and I'll let him know that he's in demand here. You'd love to have him.
Thank you so much. So I think it was a gentleman named Tip O'Neill that made a comment once that for some reason I remember it, and I think maybe a lot of people do as well, when he said, all politics is local. I don't know if you remember him making that phrase or ever hearing that phrase, but what do you think that means?
Well, I think it means something kind of different now. And I do wonder if Tip was alive today, if that would be a statement that he would make. Yeah. I think we have kind of moved away. The idea, for me anyway, as I understand it, is that issues for people that surround their home and their community are what they go and vote on, right? So it might be their pocketbook, it might be their school board elections, right?
Mayors, council members.
Yeah, it might be they're really ticked off because the roads in their community really stink and they want transportation funding, or their commute is really long. So people vote what is important to them. But again, I do feel like lately, in the last 10 years, things have become hyper federalized, and you're seeing it move that way, and people start to pay more attention, unfortunately, in my opinion, to what's happening in DC, and are slowly losing touch with all the things that are happening around them. And by the way, that's what impacts you the most. Your city council, your county board, your school board, those folks are still, and your state legislature, they're still doing most of the enacting of regulations and laws that impact you the most.
Yet there are many things going on at the state level and at the federal level that are impacting us in lots of different ways. And, people are starting, I think, to notice that and react to that.
Well, and you're right. So, for example, the one big beautiful bill that passed, OBA, as people call it, in D.C., led by the president, and it will have, So there were cuts to Medicaid, there were changes to how the systems are going to be delivered in a really fundamental way, and those are going to have a trickle-down impact on the state and the cities and the counties. Additionally, things were passed in there like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. That is going to have a direct impact to a lot of folks that we know wallet and their family budget, and in a very positive way. So it isn't to say that don't watch federal and you should, and it won't have impact. But I think that so often sort of the game that's played in politics, the red shirt versus blue shirt, people always think about Washington, D.C. Even when I was in the state legislature, people would say, well, do you go to D.C. every week? And I was like, no, I go to St. Paul. I'm voting on your roads, your budget, that, on a state level, your law enforcement. But a lot of people are sort of D.C. focused when it comes to watching TV and watching the news and following the stories.
So let's expand on that just a little bit in a slightly different way without getting too far into the weeds or to the extremes. But what are some of the good things about the state of politics in Minnesota today, and what are some of the things that maybe aren't so good or may not play out so well?
Well, I think that we saw horribly in June what played out not so well, and that was the murder of former Speaker Hortman and her wife and her husband Mark, and the shooting of Senator Hoffman and his lovely wife. So, and it was a political assassination. It was based on their politics, at least. I mean, now it was not on something they specifically did. He had lists of Democrat DFL state legislators. He'd, stalked them. He stopped at other houses. He stopped at the home of Senator Ann Rest. He's knocked on the door of State Representative Kristen Bonner. And so, that is the extreme example, but cannot be ignored. And that comes obviously from someone who was disturbed, narcissist, like you could name all the reasons. But there is a contribution that people have, and there is a rhetoric around politics right now that is so heightened. And when you he texted his family and said, Dad went to war. Now, extreme. But I have heard many people that don't really mean it in that sense, and I'm not accusing them of wanting to commit violence, but use that kind of terminology. Talk about the other side as evil. Talk about the other side. Talk about going to war in politics. The rhetoric has gotten so high, and we go back to Tip O'Neill, right? He was a good friend of Ronald Reagan. They disagreed vehemently on policy and budget, and they fought tooth and nail in the public eye. But behind the scenes, they were friendly. And you never used to see, even you watching 2012, Mitt Romney versus President Obama, their debates, so civilized compared to what we have now, which is just name calling and rhetoric and anger. And that trickles out, and then you have someone who's disturbed, and they take those kind of steps. Now, the good thing, and I will say this, is that because so many people are focused on politics, and it has become so accessible, the president, love him or hate him, by going to Twitter, by democratizing the way that elected officials talk to people, has provided access and interest and people feeling empowered in politics in a very good way. And I hope that, unfortunately, I think some people use it to the detriment, but there's a lot of opportunity for folks that want to do something to get involved, and it's a lot easier to follow and track and have input into your government, more ways than ever before.
I think a discussion about the impact that social media platforms is having, not just on politics, but almost every aspect of our lives, is a whole other discussion. Bigger than one program we could have.
It's like women in politics, right? That's a whole other access to democracy bill. Like it really is.
What is it that you think that the Minnesota voters expect from their government here in the state?
Well, I do still feel like Minnesotans are an engaged electorate. We turn out to vote at very high rates. We consistently break records or are in the top 3 states for voter turnout. And so I think that I think that, of course, we suffer from all the ills that other states have. I still believe that Minnesotans want politicians to go and get good work done, for the most part. Now, there are fringes on both sides, and their rhetoric is ramped up, and they don't really care what people are saying, and they do not want compromise. That exists, and it's very easy for it to exist on social media because, where it used to be 10,000 angry people, well, now that can seem like a really big, group on Twitter. And people can feel very connected and feel very justified and all of that. But again, still predominantly, there's folks in the middle. and they want to see good work done. They expect leadership from their elected officials. They expect work. They expect some compromise. Again, they don't expect you. I'm not saying check your strong values and principles at the door. I'm saying go in there and fight for them, and then find a way that there can be a win for both sides for the best of the state. And I just feel like, I mean, I have one of the most conservative voting records in the Minnesota Senate, and that's what I want, and I believe that's what most people want in Minnesota.
Well, I was about to ask you, in your opinion, Amy, do you think here in Minnesota, let's just focus on our state, that the voters' expectations are being met by all levels of government, not just at the State House, but out in the cities and counties?
Unfortunately, less and less. As more folks that are very polarizing get into politics, and the polarizing folks get the attention. Think on a federal level. Who do we watch? I mean, besides obviously the president is the largest, the elephant in the room there. But a Marjorie Taylor Greene says something. Now, she doesn't represent she doesn't represent most of the Republican Congress men and women, but yet she gets the sound bites, she gets the media attention, and unfortunately, that sort of drives the conversation in that direction. And so when I talk about like DC focused media, Fox News, MSNBC, all the big national channels get a lot of the money and the funding, and local press, who are supposed to be Wright County Journal-Press in Buffalo was the only newspaper that would go and cover the Tuesday Wright County Board proceedings. We need them to be covering that. I need an access to that, because democracy unwatched is dangerous democracy indeed. And so a falling off of local media just because of budgets and people and sort of that lack of attention and people just sort of focusing on DC means that a lot of those local governments that are impacting us greatly are not getting the coverage or the scrutiny or the transparency that we need them to have.
This is a good point to ask, Amy. In your opinion, there's one thing that could happen or that we could do that would make government, I won't use the word politics, make government better here in Minnesota?
Well, boy, I can think of a few. Right off the top of my head,
Okay,
I would
two.
say, two. I will say we need to transform all our primaries to a March primary. So currently, we have a March presidential primary, but our local primaries for state legislature and below are in August. And by that time, so much has already taken place. It tends to favor the incumbent, but also it makes the endorsement process very powerful. And that actually, I think the endorsement process is important, but I think a primary where you get a larger swath of voters voting would be important. And then the second thing is I'd love to see independent redistricting. Now, in the state of Minnesota, we don't have gerrymandering because for the last 5 decades, the courts have drawn up our maps. I think we should just make that official. I don't understand. People are like, well, we want elected officials to vote for the maps. Why would we allow elected officials to vote on the maps that they're voting on their own voting area? Yeah. Like, it just seems to me like I was a big we should vote for people that will vote for those maps. I have really shifted on that, and I'm saying let's have an independent council to draw up those maps, to get, have some sort of approval and fair process done, versus allowing the legislature to vote on that. I think that there's a better way on that. And again, I've come a 180 on that. I was very much like, just let the electeds decide. But I kind of think about like Fox and the Hen House. Why are we letting electeds? And again, in the state of Minnesota, it's been 5 decades anyway of redistricting that has been done by the courts. Mm-hmm. So it's not like these maps are gerrymandered in any way. Let them be what they have been.
Seems to be working.
2 things I do. Yeah. Early primary and the redistricting.
Very, very good. So every day there's a headline somewhere about something called artificial intelligence, AI. What kind of impact is artificial intelligence having and is likely to have in the future on how our governments are run, how politics are implemented, explained? What's all going to happen with artificial intelligence?
Well, so first of all, I think there's tremendous advantage to it, right? So government and AI is going to take up the slack on information processing and presentation in a way to free up people for other things. However, there are some really kind of scary things about AI that, and because of the speed at which this technology is now moving, I mean, government struggles to keep up with, simple computing, right? Yeah. Never mind AI, which is doubling and tripling, on a monthly basis, the amount of input or output that is. And so government can't even keep up with the regulation. By the time they have moved a year or two to regulate something, AI has created something that doesn't look like anything they're regulating. And so that's difficult to keep up. And then, I think about you see about these deep fakes, but not even deep fakes anymore. You can create whole videos of people that look like you, Bill, and have you say
sound like me.
And sound like you. And are not you. And boy, I mean, it's still not to the point where still you can kind of look at it and go, there's something not quite right there, but it's pretty darn close. And in another year, where are we going to be? And so in that way, I kind of think, I'm kind of glad I'm not in politics, that side of the aisle or that side of the ledger anymore, because it really adds to this like fake news, disinformation ability, and can be used, especially by enemies that would want to mess with us in a really kind of scary way. So getting ahead of that, but yet, as I said, it's really hard for government to get ahead of that because, government's still using, I don't know, the iPhone, 11, and AI's created something that doesn't need an iPhone anymore.
And there's a lot to be done to educate people on how to recognize something that's potentially a fake.
And that's what's got to happen, right? Yeah. We have to find ways, and we have to work with on the other side, there are a lot of really smart people that understand this greatly, and we need to empower them and figure out ways to provide those safeties. Yeah, but I also think there's tremendous advantage in AI. I think that, look at the fraud that we're experiencing in the state of Minnesota. My goodness, why have we not employed AI and tech to solve those problems? Why are we still relying on certain things to find? Because obviously they're failing objectively, right? Over $1 billion, according to the U.S. Attorney. So I just think there's ways that AI could be employed in a really good way too.
And yet I'm not hearing anyone talk specifically about using AI to help detect fraud in programs like
so obvious.
We've had here.
Right.
Yeah.
Also security at the Capitol. That's another hot topic, obviously, given the murders in June. And I just think, there's talk about, yes, we need more security, but what ways could tech be used to handle that will be less intrusive, still make people feel like the people's capital is open to them, provide more transparency and security for the folks there?
Well, Amy, there's just a tremendous amount of energy and great perspective that's in this interview here with us today, but we've got a couple of minutes to wrap up the program. Any thoughts or comments that you'd like to share with our viewers as we bring the program to a close?
Well, sure, and I really appreciate that. What I would just say for folks, I just want to put a plug in for folks to actually step up and run for office and to get involved. And I know it's hard and it can kind of feel intimidating and it actually can kind of feel scary, or it can also feel very frustrating. You look at sort of all the ugliness that goes back and forth. But I will say, from a perspective of someone that has served, it was a very great honor in my life. And I was able to accomplish some very, very important things that did not catch any headlines. And so it's easy to get lost in the hot button issues. But 85 to 90% of what you do at the state legislature or at the city council or at the school board is not in the headlines, and it's not a hot button issue. And it's just really good things for your community. And so I always like to sort of put a plug in for folks, particularly women. I like to encourage women, get in there, please, 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 whatever you need to do. But really overall for people to get involved in some way, in a political way. Politics is not a bad word. Politics is how things get done. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not into politics. Well, politics is into you. It's into you. It affects every aspect of your life, whether you like it or not. And so getting involved and paying attention, I mean, already your viewers, obviously, they're watching Access to Democracy. They're an engaged folks. They're brilliant, obviously, and engaged already. But if there's someone watching that has been shying away from that, I really recommend it. And it's also, it's a lot of fun. And it's fascinating, and you don't have to be involved in all the pieces, right? You could just want to focus on public safety, or you could just really care about the environment, or you might really care about voting rights, or you can pick a topic, roads. You might be really ticked off about road construction in this state, and you want to do something about it. And so you can pick your lane and get involved as much or as little as you want.
So learn the issues, right? And get out and vote. Would you say those are
minimum?
the issues?
Those
right?
for me are the minimum of democracy. That's your minimum. The sky's the limit for how you get involved.
Great last words, Amy. Thank you, Amy Koch, so much for being our guest on Access to Democracy. It's been a pleasure sharing the interview with you.
No, it's just wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching Access to Democracy. Sorry.